So this next short take is going to be about the firing of a whole lot of ESPN employees. So as we all know, recently ESPN they just got rid of some very key notable figures like Jalen Rose, like Jay Williams, like Keyshawn Johnson, Max Kellerman, and Jeff Van Gundy. And it's also quite a few others as well. And to me, I just think, you know, ESPN, they're basically cutting the costs. Okay. I think the ESPN, they have been falling off as of lately. Nobody really watches ESPN anymore unless the game is on or unless, they just want to see a little bit of highlights and stuff like that. But ESPN as a popular show itself or the network has been falling off. I personally think it's because they don't talk about any other sports that's very popular on their talk shows. Like you don't see them talking about MMA, doing whole segments on MMA. You don't see them talking about boxing. You don't see them talking about tennis or golf or baseball. What they decide to do is they basically just have a whole 2 hour show based on either football or basketball. Those are their only two transitions for their shows. And it's like a whole lot of other shows that do the same thing. That's also on ESPN's network. So I also believe that they fired a lot of people who are pro Jordan. Okay. Like they fired Jalen Rose, who has Michael Jordan as their number one player. Okay. They fired Max Kellerman, Michael Jordan as their number one player all time. They fired Jeff Van Gundy, Michael Jordan. Okay. And to me, if anything, if they wanted to fire the bad quality, they would have done it already. They would have fired Kendrick Perkins and Malika Andrews. They didn't do that. I mean, at times, Stephen A. Smith, he could be bad quality as well in terms of the way that he goes about talking about his segments. Sometimes it just seems like he didn't bring any notes to the game, and it's all just feeling with him. So that's just my perspective on that. Okay. And as far as Jay Will, I believe that he was a Jordan guy too, in terms of him having him as the best player of all time. Okay. But David McMenamin, Brian Windhorst, and all those guys, they're not fired from ESPN. Those are all LeBron guys. Now, am I saying that this is all solely the reason why they decided to fire those people? No, I'm not. Because if anything, some of these people, their contracts may have been up. And, you know, ESPN, like I said, it's been falling off as a show due to streaming services and also YouTube actually being truly competitive. Because at the end of the day, they don't want to acknowledge YouTube, but YouTube is highly competitive with ESPN. I mean, you get so many different takes on there. You get so many different channels, so many things being talked about, and it's consistent. So to be honest with you, ESPN, it's really only good for Monday Night Football or the basketball games. Okay. And they recently just started to show boxing on there. But like I said, they already did themselves a ditch already. And as far as Jeff Van Gundy being fired, why are you firing Jeff Van Gundy only? I mean, shouldn't you guys fire Mark Jackson and Mike Breen as well? I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. Why is it that he's just going? And I like Jeff Van Gundy and his takes. I've been listening to him for a while. He's always very astute with what he talks about. And I like to listen to him speak about the difference between the 90s and what it's like today, the fouls and stuff like that. Honestly, I really don't think it was ESPN who fired Jeff Van Gundy. I think it was the NBA commissioner who did it. He probably was mad at some of the things that Jeff Van Gundy was saying on TV. And then ESPN, they fired him. And the truth is that he probably was truly the person who was behind it. Because Adam Silver probably felt like some of the things that Jeff Van Gundy was saying, it wasn't really, positive all the time, pertaining to his complaints about the refs and stuff like that. And in my opinion, I just enjoyed it. Okay. Because it's just not the same, level of loving toward these players. It's not the same type of admiration towards these players when it comes to Jeff Van Gundy. Jeff Van Gundy is very objective. Okay. And the reason why that I would say Mike Breen and Mark Jackson should have gone just as much as Jeff Van Gundy should have gone is because they're a group. Okay. You can't have one without the other. All right. And to me, it was just cool to hear both sides going at it pertaining to Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy. I know that it's not going to be the same when I'm listening to them talk on the ESPN games. Okay. So that's just my perspective on that situation. I don't believe that Jeff Van Gundy should have been fired, and they probably should have did everything in their power to keep Jalen Rose because Jalen Rose, he's objective. And whatever happened to that show, Jalen and Jacoby? I used to watch that show more than I used to watch First Take because of how objective they were. And they didn't always talk about all of the same sports all the time. Okay, they would switch it up here and there. So I just think that ESPN is definitely on a downward spiral. And to me, in a few years, I think they could be potentially off the network of cable television because of where things are going. Okay. So that's just my perspective on ESPN. And I also want to give my quick perspective on Shannon Sharpe leaving Skip Bayless. So Shannon Sharpe and Skip Bayless, they have been going back and forth for a minute. I believe that, Shannon Sharpe, he could be a little bit too much of a huge LeBron fan. And I do feel like that may have played a case into why they were separating. And I also believe Shannon Sharpe, he also was, you know, making things personal between him and NBA players. And that's not good pertaining to him and John Morant, trying to make it a him versus Ja thing. At some point, Shannon, he did have some say within the show. Okay, he did. But at the end of the day, it is Skip Bayless' show. Okay, he's the one who brought Shannon on, not Shannon doing the opposite. And as far as Skip Bayless, I don't know where he's going to go from here. Because at the end of the day, Shannon Sharpe, he had all the charisma on that show. That's something that Skip Bayless didn't have. I mean, we saw what happened after the DeMar Hamlin situation. Nobody was watching Skip Bayless. Okay? Nobody didn't want to hear anything that he had to say. And I also believe that that is also a reason why Shannon Sharpe left, because of what happened to DeMar Hamlin and Skip Bayless's comments on that situation. It did seem a little bit insensitive. So that's my perspective on the situation. Okay. And do I see Undisputed continuing to be great? It just depends on who will be the next co-host and replace Shannon Sharpe. Because Shannon Sharpe, he could carry a crowd. He's very entertaining. Okay. And, you know, he does let his fanboyism of LeBron James go way too far for sure. But at the same time, you know, it was those two. It was almost like you couldn't have one without the other, just like I said for Jeff Van Gundy and his crew. Now, as for Skip, on the other hand, I think he's going to have a very hard time trying to find somebody to replace him. And when it comes to Skip, he's old. I mean, he just uses the same washed up takes over and over again. Okay. It's not like he's Nick Wright. And, you know, Nick Wright, I mean, he obviously embraces being the villain and stuff like that and being hated so much to the point where people actually care about what he has to say. Right? But he also brings facts and nuanced ideas to bring his points to a debate. That's something that Skip Bayless never does, which is what makes him boring by himself. So for Shannon Sharpe, on the other hand, you know, wherever that he goes, he's gonna be fine because of the charisma, and plus on top of that, you got Club Shay Shay. I mean, he's great at interviewing people. He does a great job doing that. And, you know, that's just my perspective on the firing of Shannon Sharpe. And like I said, a lot of these networks and stuff like that, they are going to fall short to YouTube. Because at the end of the day, nobody has been objective as of lately. Nobody has been touching on different sports as of lately. So that's it on my perspective. Have a good one.